so that we can post this online for folks to see so that they can view this presentation even if they aren't available to be here with us today. My name is Laura Thomas. I'm the Director of the Office of Sustainability for the City of Richmond, and I am so excited to be bringing this project to you all today. Something near and dear to my heart that I really love thinking about the built environment in different ways, thinking about it as a living, breathing system. And so to bring that concept through these design standards to the City of Richmond is really exciting for me. So we will get going. And the first thing I want to do is pause and take a moment to do a land acknowledgement. So while this is happening, take a second, open up your chat. If you all could, please share your name, your pronouns, and your favorite building in the city, since we are talking about the built environment. Again, my name is Laura Thomas. I use she, her pronouns. And when we think about land acknowledgements, you all are welcome to go to that site there to learn about who might have been the original inhabitants of this land. For us, where I am currently located, this is originally Powhatan land. And when we talk about the built environment, really at the core, we are talking about environmental and land justice. So we want to make sure that we're cognizant of that when we think about how we're building here within the City of Richmond. So go ahead, again, in the chat, place your name, your pronouns, and your favorite building in the city. Love to see some of the responses from folks. What are maybe some of your favorite public buildings, or maybe it's a private building, or maybe it's your home? What might yours be? I have a few. I'm biased. My home is definitely one of my favorite. I have a lot of really favorite outdoor spaces. Let's see. Oh, great. We've got VMFA. Love the VMFA. Thanks for that. We've got ICA. It is a great, gorgeous space. They also have a really great cafe. If you haven't been, highly recommend it. Thanks, Sean. Also the VMFA, understandable. It is a great, great building. VMFA. Okay, we have a crowd favorite. Oh, Main Street Station. That is a labor of love for some of the city staff who have worked on the renovations for that facility. It's an amazing facility, highly sustainable. We were glad to see the progress on that one being made. Give it one more minute here, or a few more seconds. We'll see if we get any other responses. Branch House, Main Street Station. Oh, Quirk is a great building. It is not far from my office. I do love having the chance to stop by there for some coffee. Carpenter Theater, that's a great one, Jackson. Thank you for that. Another VMFA vote. So we've got a crowd favorite for sure. Great. Well, I appreciate you sharing those things with me. And again, I'm happy to be here with you all today to talk about the built environment, specifically city projects, and how we're going to be building things as a city moving forward. So our agenda for today is we want to start off with talking about the purpose of this document. What do we intend to use this for, and how do we anticipate using it? The background of this project, where we've been, how we kind of got to today, and where we also plan to go for our next steps. We'll take some time and talk about the types of projects that these design standards are going to be applicable to, as well as the types of projects that won't have to adhere to these standards. We're going to talk about the process of new construction in the city, particularly when it comes to siting new projects or new facilities rather than just renovation. That will also lead us to talk about how we're doing community engagement and community benefits requirements. Finally, we'll talk about third-party certification requirements. So many on this call will be familiar with LEED and Envision standards. We'll talk about specific sustainable design standards for the city. So that is going to be going through some of the actual examples that are within this document. And then finally, we will get into a discussion. So before we jump right in, I do want to take a moment and have my team pop up, share their wonderful faces, and if you would introduce yourselves. These great staff are going to be here not only helping with the recording, but monitoring the chat, and they have been invaluable to making these standards come to life. So with that, maybe I'll kick it off to Tara and then Mike.
Hey there, I'm Tara Worden. I'm the sustainability manager here in the office. And yeah, I'll be here the whole meeting.
And I'm Michael Smart, Sustainability Engagement Coordinator with the office, and also glad to be here. I'm going to pass it to my friend Jack.
I am the Sustainability Engagement Specialist here in the office, and as everyone else, extremely happy to be here.
Daniel Klein, Sustainability Coordinator, thrilled to be here, love buildings.
Yes, I think this is a great group of folks, everyone on the call who love buildings probably more than most. So thank you all, team. I appreciate that. If at any point you need assistance for anything, they are here. So just type in the chat and they will be able to help you out. Okay, so jumping right in. What is the purpose of having sustainable design standards? This is really going to be ensuring that there's a certain shared criteria in relation to sustainability and resilience when we go to ideate, design, construct all new projects. So this is horizontal and vertical construction. And this is to help ensure that we're aligned with the city's vision for an equitable, sustainable, and beautiful city. Really the mayor's goal to have Richmond become the greenest city on the East Coast. And the intent of this is to actually adopt these standards as city code. So what that means is that it is kind of the teeth behind this, right? We have to adhere to it if we adopt it into our city code. So we will be able to edit, say, specific words, thresholds, requirements within the document itself. But having this adopted by city code means that whatever the current version of that document is what every project and every staff member, team member in the city of Richmond has to follow. And please note that these are generally performance standards. These are not design details. These are not specifications. These aren't things that would necessarily specifically go and say your construction documents, but rather these are those performance thresholds that guide the conversation so that we can ensure we choose the right elements for each unique project that we undertake. So the background, how we really got to where we are today, we've been doing a lot of planning for a long time, as you all know. We spent a lot of time developing Richmond 300, this nominal plan, this award-winning plan, to think about Richmond at 300 years and what we want to be when we achieve that. And so that was and always is a guiding document for everything that we do. Our office spearheaded RVA Green 2050, which is the city's climate equity action plan. And that document really comes out of Richmond 300 and is fully aligned with Richmond 300. So we spent a lot of time with RVA Green thinking about what an equitable climate future looks like for us. We've got our vision and our commitments through both of those documents. And so we really use those as the foundation for how we develop performance standards as it relates to sustainability and resilience. If we're going to get to our greenhouse gas emissions goals, we've really got to move fast and far in achieving net zero facilities, for example, or ensuring we're maximizing our renewable energy installations, or reducing the amount of construction material or recycling our construction material to a greater extent. So this is how we're developing these targets, and that leads us kind of from that policy to that target, and then moving forward, we're looking at design. So once these are adopted, all new projects will be utilizing these standards. It won't be retroactive. And again, there will always be exceptions to the rule, which we'll discuss. But this is going to be that guiding document for all project managers, all team members working on construction projects. And if at any point folks have questions in the chat, feel free to add those in, or if you have other thoughts or comments. This can certainly be a back and forth. It does not have to be just a presentation. And if you do look in the chat, you will see a link to our website where these standards are discussed, as well as a link to the Convio document. So in there, that's where you can go in and make your public comments so that we can, as a project management team, come back in and consider those comments and integrate things into the final document. So we'll circle back to that a little bit later, but it might be helpful to bring those links up and have those ready to go in case you do have questions. So there is a question I see about applying to renovation or rehab projects or just new construction, and we do have that answer for you. Want to make sure we go through that. So specifically, this is for new buildings over 10,000 square feet. So thanks for the great setup on that, Margaret. So all new construction projects 10,000 square feet or above, these standards will apply. It will also apply to major building renovations. So buildings that are over 20,000 square feet, if we replace 4 or more of any of these major systems, it's automatically going to kick into these standards. If it's 3 or less of these systems, it will not apply to major building renovations. It will apply to small project renovations between that 10,000 and 20,000 square foot. It's also, so that's kind of our vertical construction application. If we think about horizontal infrastructure, that can mean a lot of different things. It's a little more intricate and complex to integrate horizontal construction projects into performance standards. So we'll share a little bit more about how that will come into play for some of our projects. But generally, we can think about horizontal infrastructure projects in 4 different categories, or at least this is how the city has identified them. First, we're saying parks and community spaces. So automatically, any park or community space of $3.5 million or more will have to adhere to, we're going to be using Envision standards, the Envision standards that this document entails. Right-of-way projects, any right-of-way project of $5 million or more. Same with outside the fence. So inside and outside the fence is kind of how we categorize various aspects of wastewater and stormwater construction. So how we're integrating those projects. So anything with those, that's the $5 million threshold. And then inside the fence, so like a wastewater treatment plant, you can't really certify a wastewater treatment plant as Envision necessarily, but if you're at $50 million or more, you're going to have to use that Envision framework. And I want to be clear that all projects are going to have to use the LEED for vertical construction or Envision for horizontal construction checklists. So there will be no projects that move forward that don't have these kinds of considerations. We're saying that at these levels, at this threshold, you're going to be required to get certified by LEED or Envision in the horizontal infrastructure case. So what are the exceptions? So new buildings or renovation projects less than 10,000 square feet will not need to get certified. Emergency repairs won't need to get certified or look at these checklists, right? We've got an emergency out in the field from a public safety perspective. We really need to go out there and just fix things. Utility maintenance and repair projects. So usually those are one-off and small to where having a whole checklist or getting certified isn't practical. And so in those cases, what we're doing is taking a look at our performance and best practices manuals internally as an organization and having conversations about those and how we make those more sustainable and resilient so that when we do go out, we're automatically incorporating some of those concepts rather than trying to focus on the small details and the teeny tiny projects. We're going to think about how we do those processes as a whole. So small infrastructure projects are similar. Anything with less than 10,000 square feet of land disturbance tend to be things where you don't have that ability to do a big certification process or go through these long checklists if you're doing that small of a project. So again, just looking at our spec manuals and making sure those are updated more frequently. And then the small parks projects that are half acre in size or smaller will also be an exception. So one thing that we think is really important is not just establishing performance standards, but changing the way we do projects. So what is the process in which we build and construct things here as a city? So we really wanted to focus on that process and think about the integrative process and how we incorporate that. So at the very onset of a project, at the idea stage, you want to bring everyone to the table. So let's say we want to build a new building. We want to, let's call it a new department in the city, and they need a home, and we got to figure out where they go. Let's say we don't have any space at any of our current buildings. So we say we need to site a new facility somewhere within the city of Richmond. Well, at that phase, these standards are requiring us now to say, okay, if we want to build on a new piece of land, then we need to engage with that community that is in that area or in that neighborhood. We need to ensure that that's something that they want and not just something that we're placing somewhere within the city. And once we know where that site is, we need to bring all the stakeholders to the table to have conversations. So we aren't just including project managers and designers, but our CMARs on board, right? Everybody from tip to tail is going to be in the conversation, our architects, our engineers, everyone on the construction side, the community as well. We're all engaging in the conversation simultaneously so that we know how these systems and these complex built environment projects are coming together. So a great example, the Diamond District. There are so many moving parts. There's multiple architects, there's multiple development aspects, there's all the community aspects. We're trying to have these conversations in tandem so that we don't miss out on various things. So that, for example, the stormwater for one area is integrated into the stormwater collection for the other. Even if they seem like disparate projects, we want them to speak to each other. So that's really one of the biggest and most important parts. And just ensuring that as we go through design that we're having charrettes with the community, that we're having those conversations, even as we get to commissioning and enhanced commissioning prior to occupancy, we're continuing to make updates to all the stakeholders in real time. So some of our outreach requirements, not on the technical side, but still just as important, is reflecting the City of Richmond's equity agenda in this work. So really looking to empower the communities that have experienced these past injustices. And that speaks to the land acknowledgement and the environmental justice side of things as well. That outreach has to begin on the onset of conception rather than way far down the line when you've already spent money and time designing your project. So we want to make sure that folks find out about these things early on and that they have the opportunity to participate in the decision-making process. So next, we're going to look at some of the specific requirements that we have. So these are more around LEED, so our vertical construction projects. So everything shall receive 10,000 square feet or more shall achieve LEED silver. And we can always increase that in future iterations as we as a team get used to flexing this muscle around LEED and Envision. We'll get stronger at it, we'll get better at it. And if we update this document at a minimum every 5 years, we can look at increasing that silver rating there. But we will require all of these projects that are getting LEED silver to achieve 20% of the location of transportation credits, 40% of the water efficiency credits, and 25% of the energy and atmosphere credits. The rest to get us to the silver rating can be based on projects, but these are minimums that we expect all city projects to do. And of course, all the LEED prerequisites will need to be completed as well. We also are going to require that integrative process that we spoke about to be incorporated into every project. Every new city facility will have EV charging stations. Every new project that is relocating will do a site assessment, and we are going to lean heavily into the energy and atmosphere requirement section for LEED as well. And looking at that third-party commissioning and ensuring that 10% of total building energy is renewable on-site energy. We have additional requirements in there pushing us towards that net zero goal that we have established in RVA Green 2050 as well. And we can look at that in a little bit here. So those are on the LEED side. Take a quick look at the Envision side. So if you're familiar with it, the ISI's Envision framework will be used for all new horizontal infrastructure projects regardless of size. Again, all projects will use LEED or Envision checklists. We shared earlier what the thresholds for actual certification are. So that is the $3.5 million or more for parks, $5 million or more for right-of-way, $50 million for inside the fence, and then outside the fence projects like repairing or replacing a stormwater pipe. Instead of trying to focus on the teeny pipe, we are going to be going back and looking at all the city design and spec manuals. So that was a lot of information. We're going to take a moment and pause, thinking about what we just shared. Okay, so we understand why we're doing this. We understand how we got here. We understand where different elements of LEED and Envision and some things that go above and beyond in this checklist or these design standards are going to be applicable. So when you think about performance standards, I'd love for you all to share in the chat, what kinds of elements might you want to see in this document? I want to see if maybe we do already have some of those things included. So for example, we shared the 10% renewable energy. Do you want to see 100% renewable energy or net zero performance standards included in here? Thinking about things like LED lighting and compliance with international dark sky standards. Or what percentage of materials do you want to see recycled during construction? So take a second, let's get a couple of answers in the chat here and see, brainstorm on things that you all are hoping might be included in a document like this. You can have elements related to stormwater or landscaping. I know a big one that comes up often is utilizing exclusively native plants, which we almost do. I'll share ahead of getting to some of the landscaping slides that in addition to native plants, we want to allow for some wiggle room, especially for larger species that maybe have trees that will have long lifespans. We want to make sure that they can adhere to and adapt to and deal with, I guess tolerate's a better word, the increased impacts of climate change, right? So increased heat, increased drought. When those trees are 100, 150 years old, we still want them to be able to thrive in those increased conditions. So we got one answer here, design reflecting the projected conditions at the end of the project's useful life. Yes, absolutely, that's great. We're getting a bunch in. Thinking about green infrastructure requirements and including connectivity of pedestrian and bike infrastructure. Love that. We've got a good section on that in this document. Let's see, we've got typically commissioning agent is under the owner contract and not as part of the design team. Is the city going to have preferred contracts for agents to be used? And unrenewable energy site limitations might not allow to reach the 10% threshold. That's a great point. Can offsite strategies be used to meet these requirements? So For the commissioning agent under the owner contract, we don't have preferred contracts for agents to be used at this time. I think that's more of a question for our project managers and how they might integrate some of this, or how they will integrate this into some of their work. For the on-site renewable energy, if you can't meet the threshold, we do have alternatives, and I'll explain our required and preferred on the next slide when we get to that. Comments about dark sky, which we do have in here, net zero, aggressive energy performance, yes, absolutely. Stormwater reduction, shade incorporation into right-of-way, net zero again. These are lovely. So please keep typing these in. We'll be taking these comments and integrating them into our overall feedback that we're getting. So definitely keep adding those in there. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share the several different sections that are included in these design standards. Now there are a lot of performance standards built into this. So we don't have time today to go into each of those. So what we're going to do is we're going to share one example from each of those categories. I will also explain again the difference between recommendations and requirements. And then again, point you all to the Conveyo link where you can scroll through and actually spend some time on the document and read those technical standards and provide feedback on, maybe we're using the term native and a better term is native bars. I'm not going to be that subject matter expert, right? I'm not the engineer. I'm not the architect. I'm the climate scientist saying what our performance standards need to be to achieve our goals as set out in our Data Green 2050 and Richmond 300. So again, we'll go through one example from each of the categories that we have in the document, and we encourage you to share in the chat other ideas you'd like to see. Go in the Conveyo link and type very specific comments and things that you'd like to see and change based on your technical expertise. So one of the categories that we have here is looking at water. And so what this is showing is for our indoor water, we have hot water recirculation. So I'll point out, mention the requirements and recommendations. For our requirements, these are things that you are required to consider. We're looking at, to Ken's point in the chat right here, design teams need flexibility. Not everything is going to work for every project. So while we say it's required to be considered. If it's feasible, then it's required to be included. If it is not feasible, it physically sometimes cannot be included. So if that 10% renewable energy threshold is physically not possible, of course, it's not going to be something that you have to do, but it is something we at least need you to consider. Those recommendations are things that are great to think about, but really might not be applicable to every project. We want to make sure that these standards are broad enough that every project can really excel and highlight sustainability and resilience. But you can see here for this water section specifically, we've got things like hot water recirculation systems in alignment with IECC. There's 2 compliance methods there. So that's required. We're going to always have to look at that for our vertical construction. We have the recommendation to adhere to IGCC, and so we might be able to do an easy comparison there with some of our consultant teams that we work with when we're designing this. So that is an example in our water category. The next one that we're going to go to is energy. So there are a lot of elements in the energy section. I highly encourage you all to go check that out in the Conveyo link, and my team will pop that back in at this point. So if you haven't pulled that up, you can hop in and do that now. But just an example in the energy section is the building envelope. So some general standards, but we want to make sure that every vertical construction exceeds minimum performance requirements by the amounts shown in this chart. So, and it depends on what kind of building is. We ran a lovely net zero energy scenario modeler when designing and deciding what these are going to be. So our our consultant team, AECOM, who helped us create this document, they have a really great net zero modeler. And they took our performance thresholds, they plugged them into their models based off of a warehouse, a dwelling unit, or an office and administrative unit, and helped us come up with these goals. So for example, if we're designing an office building, our exterior walls have to exceed minimum performance requirements by 15% or more. There are plenty of other energy related things, as I mentioned. Another example here, thinking about resilience and resilience planning. So every facility is going to need to provide street-to-door ingress/egress routes for foot, wheelchair, and bicycle traffic, and have dedicated vehicle routes, not interfering with pedestrian safety features. We also are asking recommendations to provide more than one access point for vehicles and bicycle pedestrian traffic, and to make sure that the walkways are connected to our trails, systems, and transit stops. Might not always be necessary, but is largely a default for most of our projects at this point. Another one is thinking about flood control and stormwater. This is a really important one, and more so in certain areas of our community than others. So our requirement and our baseline for new projects is that they have to capture the first 1.25 inches of runoff from impervious surface on site for reuse or infiltration. And again, that's just a great example of how you can see it provides flexibility while also promoting some of these elements that we all love and want to see in our projects, like permeable pavement. Some recommendations include promoting rainwater collection and reuse systems. Maybe that's rain barrels. Maybe that's, I think there's a gray water element on here as well. Thinking about gray water incorporation. Thinking about flood prone areas and how to go above and beyond those. So a lot of flood control and stormwater considerations overall. Thinking about site planning and overall design. Our requirements range from conducting a pre-design site analysis, including views, to ensuring that we do not remove healthy native heritage trees, period. Recommendations, and most projects will be able to achieve this, is not to remove any healthy native trees at 14 inches diameter at breast height or higher, or larger, excuse me. Other things include protecting non-invasive trees, including CRZs or critical root zones, transplant salvage native plant material, potentially off-site. So several things when it comes to site planning and design. We also want to think about overall wellness, right? So it's not just the built environment, but we're building the environment for people. So we want to think about the wellness concepts that we incorporate. And this is a great retention tool for the city, to be honest. Lowers healthcare costs. So we want to make sure that we're requiring projects to complete a FitWell certification checklist as part of the design of the interior spaces. We want to make sure we include lactation, wellness, and prayer rooms, comfortable seating with dimming light, lockable doors, refrigeration, provide daylight in appropriate spaces, or indirect lighting from windows and skylights. Some things we recommend include entryway systems at main entrances, sit-to-stand desks, integrating natural vegetation inside the structure and not just outside, providing noise reduction barriers, filtered water, and things of that nature. So those were the primary categories. Again, we looked at indoor air quality, we looked at water, indoor water, we looked at energy, transportation, stormwater, site and landscaping, and kind of the wellness and architecture is included in that category as well. And where we're at in the process, we drafted this technical document that we're providing you all from September of 2022 to June of 2023. We've held many sessions with city team members. I've had over 100 team members comment and provide suggestions. So we've kind of shown them that initial phase was that community feedback and that input and that visioning from Richmond 300 and RVA Green 2050. Then had the technical folks inside the organization respond to that and how we can design performance standards that achieve those goals. We're developing a policy and figuring out how we want to integrate this, as we mentioned, into municipal code so that it has teeth. And here we are now in July of 2024. Conducting our community engagement. So we have this as our first session for this project today, kind of geared a little bit more towards the technical side of things. We've also got community engagements sessions designed more broadly for community members, and those are going to lean a little bit more into that community benefit side of things, looking at the community engagement process, thinking about environmental justice concepts and what folks like and maybe don't like in what we've proposed or how they would like to see it, so that we can ensure that we're lifting those voices up in the community, especially when we think about projects that require us to change or create a new location or project location. So we're going to be collecting all of that feedback from folks between now and the middle of August. So you have till the middle of August to, I believe, August 15th, and Tara can correct me if I'm wrong. We have until August 15th to accept those comments via Conveo. And after that, we're going to be incorporating those. Our project management team is going to review it. And then we're going to take it to City Council to adopt those code changes. And we potentially see that by the end of this calendar year, hopefully even sooner than that. We'll have everything adopted. And then from that adoption date moving forward, new city projects will adhere to these. In the meantime, we're also going to be training city team members. This is maybe new to a lot of folks in a lot of ways. A lot of our project managers maybe have never worked on an Envision project before. Envision's not as common as LEED. And so we want to make sure that we take the time to give city team members the tools and training and really the ability to achieve what we're setting out here in these sustainability standards. So that will happen concurrently as the final documents are being drafted and as we're taking this to City Council. And with that, we open it up for comments and discussion. You certainly are welcome to add questions in the chat, but you're welcome to come off mute. You're welcome to share your camera as well. Certainly no pressure to, but we want to take the time to engage with you all and see your initial reactions and hopefully get the chance to dive more into some of the content. Maybe if Tara, you want to field any questions to me and we'll start getting those answered. So feel free to add those in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And we'll get to your questions.
Okay, I'm seeing there where I tried to answer some questions as they came up in the chat, but there may have been some before that. Okay, looks like, can we strive for net zero energy ready standards? That is a question from Tiffany. I'll kick that over to you, Laura, to answer.
Yes, absolutely. So I am looking up in the document here. And I'm going to try and share these with you as they come up, doing a good old Control F on the document so that we can see what is included in what you all have online. So in regards to net zero, we have all new construction at a minimum shall achieve net zero energy and be compatible for demand response program enrollment. And I see a typo. I'm not a great speller. So let's, we're going to note that we need to add the E to the end of response for our demand response requirement. So again, it is a requirement to try to do. If, for example, we're not going to be building a data center, but like if we were to be building a data center, we recognize that the FAR ratio and the FAR, it just doesn't really work out for them. You'd have to be procuring offsite renewable energy to get that net zero. And then that's like a larger conversation. So I'd say, yes, we're going to require every new project to figure out how feasible net zero is. There are projects underway where they're already anticipating potentially to include that language in RFPs so that we do achieve that. So if we don't achieve it, we'll get very close.
Okay, I'll go to the next question in the chat was from Peter Braun. Seconding green infrastructure, stormwater best management practices required, green space and tree canopy minimums.
Yes, absolutely. We do mention our BMPs in here several times. So let's see if I can pull up an example for us. I don't want to scroll, if you're scrolling and it gets that weird fuzzy content. So I'm trying to find it and share it with you all. But we do talk about BMPs here. So we do require that stormwater management on site shall be provided by green infrastructure to the maximum extent practical. So it's not like, oh, let's design it and then figure out where we put this in. We're designing it as if this is everywhere and then we have to figure out how to take it out. And we certainly are referring folks to the Virginia Stormwater BMP Clearinghouse as a way to help consider that and integrate some of those things. So very good point. And Tara, you are on mute.
Thank you. Just scrolling down in the chat. I think we've noted some of these comments already. I tried to respond. So if you guys have these questions, these are absolutely wonderful questions. This is the feedback that we're looking for. If you want to utilize that Conveo link that has been popped in the chat and put some of these like seconding the information that's in here, that only gives us better business case to roll this through to the council level and get the project adopted. Scrolling. Yes, it will apply to schools. Okay, I think Luis has just put something in here. Any requirements for recycling, construction waste management, LCA for embodied energy. I think that's maybe a couple of different portions of the document.
Yeah, and the first one here is on construction waste. It's fairly ambitious. It is diverting 75% of construction waste from landfills to recycling facilities. So 75% diversion rate. And then LCA. One moment. So while I'm trying to find where it is in this close to 70-page document, we do talk about lifetime embodied energy. We actually talk about it, embodied carbon as well, and it's not on the requirement side, it's on the recommended side. I think that's one of those concepts that it involves a lot to be able to get to that accurate modeling. And that's one of those muscles that we're going to need to learn how to flex a little bit better. And I think we're going to do better over time. So there's language in there that I'm not finding at the moment, but can follow up with you specifically, Luis, on that, because we do want to be able to start thinking about that. And then if we can think of better ways to make it easier for us. I mean, we can certainly put in our RFPs and our contracts that, we're going to require the consultant to pay a third party to run the modeling, and we can do it that way. But that's typically going to be for your larger projects rather than doing it for the smaller projects. So I hope that answers it enough, Luis.
And I don't know if you want to go back to, because we tailored this presentation to the technical aspects of the document. there was a question, Monica had a comment that said projects are required to meaningfully engage with communities of project location. So if you want to touch on that process change within the way that projects are formed in the city, that may be helpful for folks on the call.
Yes, absolutely. So I think maybe historically in the city, we have had our wonderful, incredibly intelligent engineering folks that are leading these projects kind of think about how we do community outreach. Just as part of it, right? Like, so you think about, okay, I'm building a building, so I want to do this design, and then I want to share it with the community, and then I'm going to build it. And we're changing that process. So what we're saying here is we have new requirements for community outreach and how that is conducted for projects. And we're actually going to start the process of building out a community benefits framework for this. So in alignment with the equity agenda, we want to make sure that, again, we're empowering those communities. So we're including outreach throughout the life cycle, so from inception and planning to design, construction, and operations and maintenance, providing guidance. This document provides guidance on practices for a meaningful outreach process and a framework to include communities in the decision making. We want to ensure a collaborative and transparent process so folks know how we're making the decisions that we are making. Sometimes some of the decisions aren't in our control. We don't always get to decide. And, in government, especially in this mix between state and local, sometimes the state has authority and we don't get to say where a new building goes. Same with some of those other larger projects, but at least what we can do is share in a transparent manner who has decision-making authority, what we're trying to prioritize in that decision-making process. We also indicate that outreach should be conducted accessibly to achieve diverse engagements across race, income, age barriers, and other demographics. We need to, as a city and as a team, be reducing those barriers to community participation, such as limited English speaking abilities. So how are we ensuring we're providing the appropriate translation services? And I think overall, one of the things that we outline in this document that's really important, and we try to scroll to it really quickly. We also are thinking about things like the EJ screen and the Climate Equity Index when we think about site selection. I'm trying to find the Tara and Mike, maybe if you can help point me to where in the document we're setting up for the community benefits element.
It's page 27, 5-1.1.
There we go. Thank you. So we are also outlining, we're not doing this literally in this document, but we're setting it up for us. So we're saying that we have to think about how we're doing community benefits agreements for all of our new facilities. So how are we upholding inclusiveness, transparency, and coalition building so that we can make sure we're staying in alignment with RVA Green processes and Richmond 300 processes, as well as efficiency. So we're saying that the city will be creating standard templates for community benefits agreements. And I say that in a maybe lowercase version because per state enabling language, we're actually not allowed to do community benefits agreements. However, if you look at, say, the development agreement for the Diamond District, that's a great example of where we did include community benefits, just without maybe that term, in a way that still achieves the goals, but doesn't, conflict with any of the state regulations or lack of enabling language. So this document, though, does outline that we need to continue to advance in this area and that we will be creating those templates that ideally are reflective of different areas of our community, because we recognize that the West End is not the North Side, it's not the East End, it's not the South Side. And that different areas are going to need and want different types of community benefits. So I think this part is really important. And we're excited to see where this goes. And Tara and Mike and other folks on the team and elsewhere in the city will be working on those moving forward.
Laura, it does seem like there's a couple of questions that came from Giles and Peter around how this document will be enforced or communicated to other city staff, either at the UDC or CPC. You want to touch on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So city leadership has been involved in this project for close to a year and a half. Whether that be some of the deputy chief administrative officers of operations and of planning, or the other directors that are on the project management team. So like our planning director and assistant planning director who oversee UDC and planning commission, or our stormwater engineers, all across the organization have been vetting this this entire time. So they helped to build this tool. Whether it's the PMs on the technical side or somebody focused more on the community outreach side of things. Everyone's aware of this. Everyone knows this is going to become municipal code. And again, we're going to be doing that training for folks in the fall, and so they'll be more empowered to be able to follow through on this. We're also going to be including language, working with procurement, so that we can include language in our RFPs that helps us adhere to these and helps enforce this. So again, how are we utilizing our consultant teams effectively to help us achieve these things? And so there will be literal checklists in several different areas. So UDC, for example, will have this. We're also building the checklists into eBuilder. So eBuilder, for those who may not know, is going to be the project management platform for all new city construction. Every construction project and every city team member will have the ability to go in and look at every project. And this is where we're going to integrate the lead and envision checklists. So if you're working on a project in eBuilder, as that starts to roll out, and you haven't completed your, let's say it's a parks project under 3.5 million, you still have to look at the lead at the envision checklist. If you haven't completed it, you won't be able to advance further in your project because eBuilder will not allow you to sign off past that. Similarly, if it's parks projects that's over 3.5 million, eBuilder is going to say, you have to get this certified. So here's the checkbox saying that you're starting the certification process with your third-party consultant. So there's several different ways that we're coming about this to make sure that from beginning to end, we're able to enforce these.
Thank you, Laura, for clarifying some of that stuff. I don't see any other questions coming up in the chat. Okay. Lots of excitement for all of this.
Okay. Any last items that we want to touch on? Any last comments or questions? We'll give folks just a few seconds. If you have any other thoughts, again, please let us know. Share it in the chat in general, share it on the Conveyo link. You have until August 15th. You'll continue to see reminders from us and updates from us about this rolling out. But I really, really appreciate everybody for joining us today. This is so exciting. This is a really, really big change. And there's a whole lot of excitement inside the organization itself. And we cannot wait to start to see new projects moving forward and some renovations moving forward with what we're going to be doing. So thank you, and please share widely. We really appreciate the expertise that you all bring. You all are the ones that have been driving this. Some of you all participated deeply in RVA Green 2050 on the buildings and energy pathway, and this is a living example of your work coming to fruition. So Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon.